Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate, and you're watching me in HD. And for that, I'm really sorry. But to take you off of me, this man, Chuck Plunkett, formerly of the Denver Post. Glad to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Jon.
All right, so in all disclosure, you hired me to be a columnist in the Denver Post, and I'm really grateful for that. Thanks for the opportunity, and God, what an idiot you are.
Well, we tried to have a free marketplace of ideas on the opinion pages and the perspective pages, and we needed people of all stripes and views, and you helped give us a little bit of conservative credibility. That
make everybody look reasonable by comparison. All right, I'm here to talk to you about this.
Okay.
And your resignation from the Denver Post. This editorial section sent off a wave nationally, and actually even internationally, as a paper that spoke up editorially against its owner. You bit the hand that fed. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, most people already know this, but this editorial section of News Matters, you take on the hedge fund, the capital group that owns and has been squeezing the Post. Tell me, first of all, why you needed to do it, but I want to know how. I mean, how in the world did this actually get to happen?
Well, the why should be very straightforward. We believe that the downsizing of the Denver Post, the cuts to the newsroom, the consistent loss of investment in a quality newsroom in a state that is important as Colorado is, had to be recognized and had to be addressed. And the problem, Jon, is that for a long time, and myself included, I bought the argument that the decline of newspapers was due to market forces. We weren't fast enough to reinvent ourselves. The internet destroyed all the advertising, and we lost the classifieds. There's so many narratives, but the truth is, over the last several years, at least since 2011, we've been retooling ourselves and positioning ourselves to be the journalist of the 21st century. We're very good at doing things like blogs. We're very good at being 24/7. We're very good at social media. Journalists at the Denver Post know how to be the 21st century newsroom, and yet we're not seeing the kind of investment that paper needs to benefit and to adequately serve the people of Colorado. And why is that? Well, it's because national and local media experts have been digging in, and they've been finding out that Alden Global Capital, which owns the parent company Digital First Media that operates the Denver Post, nearly a dozen other papers in Colorado, and dozens across the country from coast to coast, has been milking it for profits at a rate much higher than other media chains. And it's got a cynical strategy, many people believe, just to run us dry in the next 3 years and to sell us for parts. That's why we did it. We felt like we had to let people know. It's not because the newsroom was being lazy that you've got less reporting than you used to have. It's not because we're all just sitting around on our ass that there's fewer stories of interest in the pages. It's because we're being cut to a level that is far below what other city papers have.
Let me add a couple things. One, as a guy who's been reliant on both papers throughout my political career, it was heartbreaking to see the Rocky go. And although I will rip the Post, and I have for decades, about a bias, there is no doubt to me how hard reporters work. And watching what has happened in the Denver Post over the years, going into the newsroom, talking to the people there, it is almost as if it was that scene from I Love Lucy with the conveyor belt with chocolate, and it's faster, and all of a sudden you have fewer people doing more stuff faster, faster, faster. Get it out, get it online. It was a breakneck speed that just cannot continue. I mean, it's at some breaking point you go, it's no longer a news service, it's something else. Tell me how this came to be, because I can't imagine an owner of a company wants to be shown up by their employees in a full editorial spread that has rocked the world.
It shouldn't have happened. If Digital First Media had invested more in the Denver Post, it wouldn't have had to happen. And it wouldn't have been as easy for it to get through. For the majority of the time that I was the editorial page editor, I reported to a very good publisher named Mac Tully. And he was my interface with the broader company. And he resigned in mid-January. Did
he resign for the same reason that Greg Moore resigned, which I'm reading into this, which is, I can't just keep firing people. I went into journalism to do more than shrink a paper to nothing. Is that why he resigned?
That would be my assumption. Yeah. He hasn't said on the public record exactly those things, but many people who work with the Denver Post and with digital first media and what have you are weary of the bloodletting. At any rate, my marching orders day in and day out with Mac Tully, he's a publisher. He's running the entire operation, right? He's a busy guy. And though he's a member of our editorial board and wants to know what we're writing about, he's not in the day-to-day. He attends important meetings, like endorsement hearings and things like that. But his marching orders were pretty much, hey Chuck, if you're going to do something that's going to cause me heartburn in the community, or if you're going to take a position that I need to know about, well, let me know about it. Just don't surprise me. And that was something I very much honored. I never surprised Mac Tully with any editorial. I would always let him know what I was thinking about doing ahead of time. And if he thought that he needed to see more, I would show it to him in advance. Clearly, there's no ethical quandary there. No, that's just business as usual.
But Mac wasn't there when you did this.
But Mac wasn't there. So I talked to the next most senior person who was willing to talk to me, and that was William Dean Singleton, the former publisher and owner, former owner and publisher and leader of the Denver Post and synonymous with the Denver Post for so many years.
Let's take an off ramp there for just a second. Dean is, in my mind, the Denver Post. I mean, he has been a fixture in the city. Politicos want to be next to him because they consider him a bit of a kingmaker. I mean, there was a time that, his passion for this paper, brought it to what it was. And so you talked to him, but he's no longer the owner. What is his role? Or what was his role?
He was a member of the editorial board, and he was the chairman of the board that oversees the Denver Post. Now he has stepped down from those roles. He joined me in my departure. And he's every bit as upset as what's going on at the Denver Post.
So Dean knew you were going to do this.
Absolutely. So the way it worked, John, is we had moved and consolidated our newsroom down and down and down at the building now that I refer to as the Digital First Media building, that white building down, that iconic building that used to be considered the Denver Post building, but we're not there anymore. And at the end of last year, they were moving the newsroom out to the printing plant, or the Washington Street campus, as we like to call it. And the thought was that, well, this will hold us for about 2 years. We won't have to worry about this kind of yearly bloodletting, this yearly downsizing.
Right.
Maybe we've kind of hit bottom. We're going to save a lot of money moving out there. We're going to be in good shape. January dawns. We're talking about moving behind a digital paywall or a digital subscription model. That's being used with success at other papers. We had targets that we had to hit. We figured we could hit them. And those kinds of positive things were going to happen. Then all of a sudden, even before January got here, and we were able to start doing those nice things around Thanksgiving time. Thanksgiving, which is a really wonderful time for cuts, we started cutting more people in the newsroom. So suddenly I thought we were going to be safe. I thought we'd hit bottom, and now 5, 6 more positions are gone. And one of the people that joined the exodus was my much loved friend Linda Shapley, the managing editor. So even back then, I started to think, something ought to be said. Someone ought to get the word out that what's going on here is destructive and can't be sustained. Then Mac resigned, and I started to find out about the lawsuit that a minority investor in the holdings that operate our company, their name is Solus, was challenging Alden.
Their name is Solus?
Solus.
Really?
S-O-L-I-S.
I'll let that one slide.
S-O-L-I-S. Charging a number of things, but one of the things they said was that you're taking hundreds of millions of dollars of your newspaper profits and you're putting them into investments that are basically shaky and dubious. And I was talking to Dean about it, and I had this moment where I thought, Dean, we should editorialize about that. And he didn't say no. And in the past, Dean had always been very much, now Chuck, when we're on the editorial page, we focus on Colorado, we focus on Denver, we don't focus on our own internal office politics and dirty laundry. And so it had always been something that I just kind of left off the table. But this lawsuit came, and then right around that time, I found out, as Dean did, a couple weeks before everybody else did, about these 30 positions that were going to be reduced.
Bringing it roughly from 90 people running a major paper down to 60.
Yeah, the numbers are actually a little better than that. We were at 100, and we were trying to get down to 70. I've characterized it as 60 some or 60 plus because there there was some noise in the system, and there were some positions that were disappearing, and I wasn't sure they were going to be refilled. But if you want to look at it at its best possible light, 70 was what they were trying to get to. But still, 70 is far below, and city limits of Denver alone is more than 700,000.
Well, and the metro area is almost 3 million.
That's right.
And we used to have nearly 500 people working news between the two papers.
Right.
And now to have 60 to 70,
my
can't be
hometown,
done.
I love this. I love to use this little factoid. My hometown paper, the Arkansas Democrat Gazette, and a city, a fraction, a seventh of Denver's size, has combined, and when you put all of its elements together, roughly 130 folks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So, still, I'm missing a pice here.
Yeah, we
So
haven't finished the narrative yet.
All right. What happened next?
Well, okay, so I knew a couple weeks before they had the company-wide meeting, the number of cuts, and Dean and I were talking about it, and it was just keeping me up.
So you're walking around knowing that a third of your
right.
fellow colleagues are going to get the axe,
and knowing too that was bound to affect the editorial page, that we would suffer too. And we were only a 3-person department, and I figured they're cutting by a third. Now we're going to be, I can do that basic math. So
even as a journalist,
even as a journalist, right? So we all go out to the printing plant on March 14th, and Leanne Coluciopo, the editor, has to deliver that news, and she says the number and 30, and there's this I still can't even talk about it without getting emotional. There's this just like stunned moment of silence followed by this crush of just emotion and tears. And I had the thought, I felt like sometimes you're so shocked, you feel like you're floating out of your body. Yeah. I had that feeling, and I had the thought, if someone was ever going to make a movie about the Denver Post, this would be the scene where they were like, this is when it dies. This is the final chapter. That we're about to, this is the final chapter, that we're going to be in the death rattle or throes from now on. And I thought somebody should write an editorial about this. And right around that time, Ricardo Baca, who used to work with us and led the Cannabis and did wonderful things for the Denver Post, wanted to write a first-person gonzo piece about how odd it was to be protesting a company, protesting anything for the first time in his life, because journalists don't, our ethics policy, we don't do that. And he wanted to write a very direct, in-your-face charge of protest to Alden. And I got out a notebook and I started writing, who could I join with? Because I do these special perspectives. Right. You've been a part of them, where it's themed and everybody's writing about the same topic. I said, why don't we do an importance of local journalism section? We'll have Ricardo, I'll see if I can get Greg Moore, I'll see if I can get Jon Caldara to write something from his perspective. And I started to think about different people that could work. And I wanted, ultimately what I came up with over the next several days is I wanted people who had a direct tie to the Denver Post. My first thought was ask people from the community, like a Michael Bennett or a Michael Hancock or something like that. But then I thought that's really not fair of them to ask them to talk about the importance of your paper when if they don't play ball, you're the editorial editor, right? And you're gonna help us out here, right? So I didn't want to do that. So I decided to stick just with Denver Post people, and that had a nice feel. Because people could see over the range of time, oh yeah, I remember she used to write for us and that kind of thing. We needed a unifying theme. The editorial was going to be the unifying theme. We decided to do it twice as big as normal. Started on the cover. We never start an editorial on the cover perspective, unless it's something like a presidential endorsement. It's a tool we use rarely. I came up with that idea, used that picture. The Guild had been using a picture that we took down in the lobby in 2013 after the newsroom won the Pulitzer Prize for its coverage of the Aurora Theater shooting. And some clever journalist within the Guild, wanting to show the impact, started blacking out those of us who are no longer in that picture. And it's just such a dramatic thing. And I realized that the editorial, once you start doing this, it's going to get attention, and it's going to make a big splash. And I called up Dean. This was the Wednesday before. I called up Dean, and I said, I've got this special section. We've talked about it a little bit, but here's actually how it's going to work. And I want you to know the editorial is pretty strong, and it's going to call out Alden. And he said, well, have you thought about that? Because if you do that, you're likely to lose your job. And I said, well, it certainly has crossed my mind. And he said, well, what's your answer to that? And I said, well, to me, I believe we have to do it. if we don't say something now, if we don't speak up now, we're just going to be writing our own obituary and down the road, and that down the road is only 2 or 3 years away. And he said, well, if you do that, I'll support you. He says it's the right thing to do.
Did your editor know? I guess since Mac Tully left, there really was no editor of the Post. Did Leanne know?
No. Leanne knew we were doing a special section on the importance of local journalism. She knew we were looking for that photo. I'm certainly very friendly with Leanne. I count her as a close friend and a confidant.
Why didn't you
But
tell her?
I didn't want her to have the responsibility. I was giving her deniability. I wanted it to be my fault if it was anyone's. And also, I wanted it to get published. I didn't want it to I was as responsible as I felt like as I needed to be.
If she knew,
but,
she would have to take it up the chain
Yeah.
and go, this is
Right.
coming.
Right.
Alden would turn around and say, no
Yeah.
way.
And that wasn't breaking any kind of rule. I'd never reported to Leanne.
Right.
Leanne reports to the publisher. The editorial page editor reports to the publisher. Greg Moore set up that all the way back when he joined the Post all those years ago. He said, if you want a professional newsroom, you can't have the editor also being seen as someone who's controlling the editorials,
Right.
for hopefully for obvious reasons. So when Mac resigned to save money, they didn't replace him, okay, with an actual Denver Post publisher.
There's a certain poetry to that,
Yeah,
isn't there?
I mean, you'll see. This was a unique opportunity that I had that most people would lack. They didn't replace him, and Guy Gilmore, who is the current acting chief of Digital First Media, should have been the publisher. And we offered, do you want to be on the editorial
Right.
board? Any of that? And he said, no, I'm a business guy. I don't want to have anything to do with that. And so I just told Dean.
And off it went. So you hit the publish button Friday afternoon on the electronic side. And you guys usually do it, I know, at noon because everybody in my shop goes at noon. We're going to see all the editorials that come out for the Sunday paper. We're going to see them on Friday afternoon. And it wasn't up there. Like, that's not like the Post. You waited a couple hours to hit the publish. Was that to make sure that the offices were closed out in?
No, we thought about, to preserve that print edition especially, we thought about timing everything to launch late at night on Saturday.
Right.
And then that way it would have been a complete surprise, and there would have been a poetry to that because print, you would have broken the news in print, right?
Right.
But when does that ever happen anymore, right? The only reason we didn't do it at noon is because we just didn't have all of our stuff together. That's a big package, and we wanted it all to pop, and we were trying to get everything down, fine-tuned to the last little second, and we gave ourselves a couple extra hours to get it polished.
When you hit publish, the news went to Alden, I would imagine, at the speed of the internet. What happened? Did they call back and say,
You know, that's the
get this
funny
down?
thing. Digital First Media's Guy Gilmore, the best I can tell, doesn't even have a Twitter account. And it launches at 2, and 2 hours pass, and it's going absolutely nuts, right? It didn't take but a second for it to start going absolutely nuts. And it wasn't until 2 hours that I got a call from the Washington Street plant saying, hey, guess what? There's an angry call to Leanne from Guy. And it was, so we had a little bit of a 2-hour window before they discovered what was going on.
Wow.
Now that goes to press on Saturday night. At least then, these deadlines are being accelerated already scheduled. But we weren't going to press until 7 o'clock Friday night, so they could have stopped it. And my understanding is, Guy considered firing me. He considered pulling it offline, and he considered taking it off the printing plant. And there were people that were pulling wire and trying to create a new perspective section that could replace it.
So they were actually putting together a replacement piece of paper.
In case he wanted to go that route, the instructions were get ready in case we need to have an alternative.
They didn't. My suspicion is because they knew it would look bad.
Right.
That's my suspicion. I think they didn't fire you because they knew it would look bad. I'm there watching this and I'm thinking, yeah, they don't have to fire him, but they can wait a month and find another reason to fire him. And lo and behold, they didn't fire you. You quit. So we're getting tight on time, but help me out. You know, I'm thinking, wow, you guys dodged the bullet on this one, and then all of a sudden I read you're gone.
Right.
Why?
Right. They didn't get the message. Ideally, what happens when a newspaper exposes a wrong, the people who are the wrongdoers try to act like they get the message, and they try to form some kind of response. Why didn't they take me or some other people in the newsroom and some smart people from the business side and say, okay, here are the business realities that we see, and here are the journalistic imperatives that we see, put us together and figure out if we couldn't somehow make things better. Instead, it was, you can't write about this anymore. You need to stop talking about it to people like Jon Caldara on TV. And I started to feel like I was beginning to pull my punches. And that's an awful feeling for a journalist at any point, but it made no sense to me at all to pull my punches after I already risked my job once. When Dave Krieger, my counterpart at the Boulder Daily Camera, was fired, I thought...
For writing something similar to
doing
yours,
something very
which
similar.
was not allowed to be put on the paper. He put it on a blog post, and he gets canned for it. We assume that's the reason. I think it's a pretty good assumption.
Yeah. Well, isn't that a great thing for the Denver Post to editorialize about?
Right.
It's a sister paper. Boulder's an important city. It's an intellectual capital in the Rocky Mountain West. And everyone wants to know, was that the right thing to do? Was it insubordination what Dave Krieger did? Because he was, unlike me, a publisher told him, no,
don't do it.
Don't do this. They took a vote on her, and he ran it anyway on an alternative site. Isn't that insubordination? However you come down on it as a company, even if we wanted to say, hell yeah, it's insubordination, he deserved to be fired, you still owe it to your readers to work through that intellectual problem, right? And yet we knew that that wasn't going to be accepted. And so we kind of sat on our hands for a little while. Then Ken Doctor, a national media expert, comes out with more information that backed up our editorial from April 6th. That was also important to write about. And then this company-wide effort to start silencing folks anywhere in the paper, not just me.
And you had enough.
And I thought, come on, you can't have that. And we need to update what just happened a month ago, and we need to say, guess what? Our folks aren't even getting, not only did they not get the message, they're now trying to silence the messenger. And this is dangerous to Colorado. It's dangerous to democracy. And they wouldn't let me run it. I went for a walk in the rain, which was cinematic and wonderful, and came back and wrote my letter of resignation.
All right, only a couple minutes left, but I want to dive into this. You've got a lot of pride in the Post. You have the romanticism that a town like Denver needs a paper record. I tend to agree with you, but we're old guys. We're attached to these things. So let me push on this. You know, in economics, we call it creative destruction, that businesses crater, and out of the ashes come new incredible things. You know, are you holding on to a buggy whip company as Henry Ford is making a Model T, and that, you know, you're getting sentimental about this, but people want to know things, and people will find out things, and just because the Post has been around for a century and a quarter doesn't mean the Post is the place to do it.
It's just not true. It's not true that the business model is deteriorating. The company-wide is making 17% operating margins. The Denver Post is making 19% profit year over year, pretty much 20% year over year. The cuts are not being done because of good business reasons. The cuts are cynical, and the cuts are outside of normal media expectations. And other papers that have employed full-size newsrooms that are more appropriate for the size of their city are doing well and are making money. If you own something like a newsroom, you owe it to the public to do a good job and to make sure that it's staffed properly.
All right, if they're making 20% and other papers are making good money by doing it the right way, you know, their 20% isn't going to last forever. They're going to squeeze this until it collapses, and then they won't make anything. A long-term profit center is building a paper the way that Dean Singleton built, which will be profitable year after year after year. So does this just mean that there's opportunity for somebody else? I mean, yeah, they're screwing it up. People in business screw it up all the time. You know, we're acting as if there will be no paper. How do we know? We don't know what competition is going to come to replace this, because it is crumbling. It is collapsing upon itself.
Fair enough. If the newsroom that I see isn't the newsroom of the future and something else stands up in its place, I'm happy to work at that other place as well. It's tricky, this fragmentation of news that you're seeing, where, well, if you want to understand education, you have to go to this website. If you want to understand public policy, you have to go to this website. If you want to really get into politics, you have to go to this website. To me, there's great utility in a gathering place, a public square.
But if the marketplace wants that, my instincts are the marketplace is going to get it.
And that's fine. But you're talking about competition, which I would think you're talking about on a level playing field, one that's fair, where you have the expectation that the people that are playing the game are trying to win. And these are not people that are trying to win. These are people that are trying to get rich in the short term and move on. And when you're talking about making money, getting rich in the short term sounds great to me. But when you're talking about doing something as important as keeping the public informed and calling balls and strikes on complex public policy and those things, you need to invest, and you need to try to figure out how to save that for the future, because if you don't, it's a crime. It's a crime against humanity.
You see this not as a business, you see it as an institution.
That's fair. On some level, I'm willing to take less profit for a longer term.
Only a minute left here. But there are people out there who go, that's adorable that you see it as an institution. I got to make money work. I see it as an investment. We're going to run it into the ground. We're going to make our money, and then we're going to invest it in something else. Why is that wrong from a business point of view?
Why can't you just invent the newsroom of the 21st century and make money for decades to come?
On that I agree. All right, less than a minute here. You know, we've become friends. I'm worried. What are you going to do? How many job offers are you going to get? You're running NBC News now?
I haven't gotten tons of job offers, but I've gotten some very nice ones, and I believe I will be able to stay in journalism, and that's what I'm going to do.
Will you be able to stay in Colorado?
That's my goal.
So you want to put out your want ad now?
I'm not going to do that.
Chuck, thank you so much. We're going to do this again. I'm so proud of you, and we're all grateful for what you've done. Check out the Independence Institute, independenceinstitute.org. Look for me on what's left of the Denver Post. We'll see you next week.